So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, and their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Aran Bates, who's the CEO and co-founder at Hydrologiq. So, Aran, firstly, thank you for spending a bit of time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, Hydrologiq, what you do, and how you help people, that will be wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. So, yes, as you said, Aran Bates, CEO, co-founder of Hydrologiq, Yorkshire-based business that's completely focused on getting rid of diesel-powered generators in the off-grid setting. So, construction, festival and events, film and TV production, a range of other use cases. They're all using diesel when they have a need for temporary power and they're off
Yeah,
grid. And when we look at the amount of CO2 that produces and extend that through to other construction machinery, there's about 5 times the amount of CO2 produced from construction machinery globally than cars. So it's like this huge
wow,
hidden polluter, massive, right?
wow.
But we don't think of it because it's in a
No,
field, it's behind, building a highway somewhere. It's behind barriers because nobody really wants to look at the construction site. So
yeah,
we have no idea, right? It's outside, out of
yes,
mind, but massive. So we're entirely focused on decarbonizing that space, getting rid of not just the CO2 pollution, but the local air pollution, all those particulates that's bad for us being around as our own health, breathing it in, really cleaning that whole space up, getting rid of the noise from it, making it a lot quieter. So, as we say, better for the planet, better for people, getting rid of dirty diesel. So how do we do that? What are we doing? Well, we're making hydrogen fuel the kind of easy replacement for that diesel fuel, for those diesel fueled assets. So we make it very easy for those end users to stop using diesel and start using hydrogen. So
right.
today we provide a completely managed service for the customer, everything right from planning all the way through to procurement, working through that supply chain, pulling it all together. And then we make it happen on the ground. We provide those site engineers, we deal with the refueling and, deal with all the insurance. So we just basically say, great, you don't want diesel, we'll solve that for you. And that means also working with batteries. It means working with solar. Like all of these things fit together. I think a lot of people get quite binary about it and they
Yeah,
go, oh, it's hydrogen or it's batteries. And it's like, no, 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 it's
yes,
both. Absolutely both. So,
yeah,
that's what we do. Make it really easy. We provide that completely managed service. Underneath that, we're building a suite of products. We call it Hydrologiq OS, but basically it's that operating system of software and hardware that not only integrates that site, makes that generator, that hydrogen generator work with any hydrogen fuel source, gives the customer all the monitoring, a centralized place for all their documents, makes it really easy.
yeah.
But we also then, that software we're building integrates that supply chain. So make sure the right fuel is getting to the right place at the right time. So um, ultimately, we're a product development company,
Yeah.
but today we provide the people that do the doing.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. So you're providing service which ultimately will become more product oriented over time.
Absolutely. So as trained users in this space grow, like frankly, the hydrogen space, this switch cannot happen if we expect Hydrologiq to be the people doing all the doing, right? That's just
Yes.
unfeasible. And like our entire mission was to accelerate this change. So
Brilliant.
for us, we want to see more people out there doing. Of course, we'd love to see them using Hydrologiq products, but it's about
Yeah.
making this quick.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So if we sort of start at the beginning, can you tell us a bit more about your background, how you got into business, and why this particular one for you?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting question. So my background, very much sort of engineer by schooling, let's say. So I studied engineering at Oxford. While I was there, kind of did a range of different modules. So everything from, as boring as it is, the theory of C++ programming to some civils, some mechanical engineering, some biomechanics and things like that, and kind of came out going, uh, what kind of engineer am I? I don't know. And actually, I find the world of business really fascinating.
Yeah.
So I left. I did not go into engineering. I went and joined Deloitte as a consultancy, did a lot of work in financial services actually
Yep.
there, looking at kind of ecosystems, networks, how things interact with each other to market level.
Yep.
Um, After a few years, found myself itchy feet, really wanted to leave, start my own company. So that had been something I've been wanting to do since I was probably 16. Now,
Right.
admittedly, when I was 16, I thought I love sailing, right? And I grew up sailing. I lived by the sea in Scotland and
Great.
thought, I'm going to own my own yacht design company. That was kind of the vision. I don't do that, obviously. But so yeah, kind of left Deloitte, set up an online delivery dry cleaning business in London, of all things. Again, it was sort of network play. Also started back at another technical engineering consultancy. I felt that need to get back towards something technical.
Yep.
And I think that as a precursor to getting into Hydrologiq kind of set the scene. Like what I find really interesting is this interplay between a market dynamics, the ecosystem, the supply chain, and how that works, and
Yep.
how technology can be used to really answer customer need. Like start with the customer. What do they need? What does this market need? And how can technology play into that? So that's like technology is like the third angle in, but it's got
Yes.
to solve some of these problems.
Amazing, amazing, and so as you mentioned it younger, but is this always what you saw yourself doing, or did you have other plans as well pre-16?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Supposing my mum said that I started out and I wanted to be a mad scientist. That was, you know, sort of 5, 6, 7-year-old Aaron, or whatever. That was what I wanted to do. That was my idea of making things, that, then an
Brilliant.
inventor. And then eventually came to realize that meant probably being an engineer. But yeah, I just always had a sort of fascination with making things,
Yeah.
business, how that works, economics. Would you have ever said I would have ended up in effectively what is energy or construction machinery or that whole space? No, I would have never guessed that. And in
Yeah.
many ways, I think prior to getting into this space as an outsider, right, I came in from a kind of this technology view, market view type space. And I would have probably told you at age 16, 18, like, God, that sounds boring. But it's when you get under the skin of something, you realize actually just how
Yes.
fascinating it can be.
No, I could totally concur. I mentioned earlier I joined an energy power generation oriented company at the age of sort of early mid 20s, second job, and I didn't know, and one of the I remember at my interview the MD said, "What, can you describe to me how a how a power station works?" And although I'd been responsible for computer systems for monitoring it, I didn't, and it was just fascinating. The more I understood how we went from huge lumps of coal all the way through to grinding them up to blowing them into a boiler, and the whole process was fascinating. So it's no, I could totally get that when the more you get into something, the more you can find fascination in what these amazing things. And so looking at the business so far, what are some of the biggest issues and challenges you've had to overcome so far to get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's the fact that we're building a business in a kind of pretty new space. I mean, yeah, okay,
Yes.
hydrogen technology has been around since some of the NASA flights, right? So it's not
Yep.
like it's inherently new, but as a supply chain, as something that's
Yes.
kind of widely used across the industry,
Yeah.
it's completely new, right? So there's a lack of knowledge
Yep.
from the end customers. There's a lack of integration in the supply chain. There's new products constantly coming out. So it's all lots of new and lots of not yet there. And yet at the same time, what we're trying to do is integrate all that to give this easy answer to the customer so they can just adopt and start using it. And so I think the biggest hurdles almost can be kind of phrased as how I look back over the last 4 or 5 years. And it was like the first couple of years, you have to just explain to people what is hydrogen. Most people would not really heard of it or considered it as a fuel, certainly. Then you got into this space of like, oh, that's just the Hindenburg, right? You just bring in a bomb onto my site. And so then you went into this period of just like sort of not unfounded worry or naivety, but this period of saying, well, no,
Yeah.
look, it can be managed safely. It is safe. No, I'm not just
Yes.
bringing a bomb onto your site. So I think some of those have been the big challenges in this kind of corralling of trying to move all these players and pieces of the industry forward together
Yep.
and pull or help them move together, not playing our part in that, so that it kind of lands to deliver something valuable or useful. And I think some
Yes.
of those have been the biggest challenges. I mean, thankfully now we're at a place where we're having sensible conversations about how to use hydrogen. What does it mean? There's a greater understanding. I think there's far more acceptance that actually this will be, if not the replacement to diesel, certainly like one of the top two replacements.
Yeah, brilliant.
So,
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think it's that we always talk about sort of a formula for change in what we do in coaching, and the two main parts are both a vision of how good it could be on the other side, but also dissatisfaction with the current situation. And I guess the growing dissatisfaction with anything that produces CO2 is driving that change
yeah,
a bit faster than it might have done 10, 20 years ago. As I'm conscious that the technology has been around for a reasonable time, but not at that sort of retail level, has it? For until
yeah, exactly. And I think I was talking with someone this morning about actually, for this driver to change, a lot of people look, talk about sort of supply and demand curves and the economics in there. And
Yes.
in this case, it's not so much a supply driver. It's like a need for pollution reduction, right? And
Yes.
so some of that CO2 pollution, some of that's
Yep.
air pollution. And as that drives up and costs come down, depending on the business and where they are, that could be okay, we're willing to accept it 2 times the price of
Yes.
what it currently costs us to do and
Yep.
things like that. And so that is becoming an ever stronger driver.
Yep.
And seeing how companies are going to react to like, okay, I want to win that contract for that's going to be delivered in 2030 and 2035 that might need a diesel-free site. Well, okay, that means that the contract for tendering is coming out in the next year or two. But if I want to win it, I need to be able to show that I can do it already. And so there's this
Yep.
kind of backward ripple effect of likely or impending regulation as well, which is great to see, that sort of
Yep.
this stuff driving change.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And looking at the sort of the growth of business today, what are the biggest learnings that you've had about growing a business and I guess an SME business especially?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest learning for me came not actually in Hydrologiq, but the last time round when I was doing the online delivery dry cleaning, which
Yes.
was interestingly enough, and but it very much has reinforced itself this time round, is that like if you're not really passionate about what you're working on, you will fail. Like,
Yeah.
just almost don't start, because the amount of rejection you face, and you got to take that really impersonally, the amount of like hard work that it is. And I think it sounds so cliche to say it's a huge amount of work, but it's a bit like becoming a parent. I think, you never appreciate how much it is and all the pieces that are entailed until it finally happens to you. And I say this as a father of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Um, so I think you've just got to believe so deeply in what you're doing
Yeah.
that it feels like it's almost like a hobby, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of, you just kind of like, if you find yourself, what do I want to do? I could go do that other enjoyable thing, or oh, actually no, I've got this interesting problem. I might go back at work, and it sounds super sad, but like it's got to almost be at that level, I think.
Yeah, I think it's that idea that if you find something you really love, then you never do a day's work in your life, sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's not work, is it? It's pleasure. It's something that you just we're absolutely passionate about, and it can be difficult to find those things, but once you do, then it's maximize your time on that.
yeah, and look, it's also a privilege to be able to find that thing and to have that space, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, being able to kind of quit work, start a company, go for a period of time without being paid is a privilege. Like not
Yes.
everyone gets to end up at that position in life, whether through their own work or circumstance, chance. So, um, I suppose there's a lot that has to align. But yeah, I mean, if it does, certainly certain things need to be there, like
Yes.
loving what you do.
Absolutely. I think it's and I think it's Brian Tracy talks about the most effective organizations are the ones where most people spend most of their time doing the three things they really love and they're really good at. And
Yeah.
and the challenge with the small business is we tend to have to do a bunch of stuff that we don't really enjoy as to do the stuff that we do.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
If that makes sense. But the quicker we can get to primarily focus on the stuff we really do, everybody wins. We grow
Yeah.
faster, more effectively. People are more efficient because they're just loving what they do. But it's quite difficult in this sort of multidisciplinary phase that we have to go through from, say, 0 to probably 20, 30, 50 people. It's we have to put up with a lot more than when we get to a point where I just want to do this really fun stuff.
Yeah, no, that's also definitely true.
And you're probably where we're sort of business coaching organization. I'm keen to know who the best coaches are that you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, life in general. Who've been the biggest influences on you?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And I actually think for me, probably one of them is actually my wife. And so,
Right.
she's been working longer than I have. So she's a chief data officer at Saatchi and Saatchi, one of the advertising firms in London.
Yes.
And through her career before that, even outside of the whole world of data, like she definitely has more empathy than I do. And so when it comes to sort of dealing with, understanding how personal needs, role needs, how they all fit, how does an organization work, so we met actually when we both worked at Deloitte, but she'd spent a while there. And so again, through working with and working on a lot of businesses in her time there, so she's seen a huge amount. So like as one of those sounding boards, and equally she knows me very well, so she can
Yeah.
basically say, Aaron, this is how I think you're going to be thinking about it, or this is how you'll react. This is, invaluable. So like, again,
Brilliant.
the privilege to have that, next door, so to speak, office next door.
Absolutely valuable. Absolutely. And the level of accountability, I would imagine.
Yes, exactly.
Which is a big part of coaching, for absolutely sure. And, and have you picked up any? I love to collect any favorite quotes or sayings that you find yourself using on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. None spring to mind at the moment. I mean, there was one that like definitely I remember hearing when I was back in my consulting days, which I don't know what this says about consulting, to be fair, actually, but they said that sometimes it's more about the sizzle than the sausage, as in like it's more about the presentation than what's actually there. But like, frankly, actually, if you distill that out a little bit away from sort of the trite, I think it is like if you can't present your work in a way
Yes.
that looks really good, how do you expect people to then trust the content of it if you're not really, it's about
Yes.
presentation, whether it's presenting yourself, whether it's presenting your work. So I think there is truth in that. And, I suppose also, frankly, sometimes if the content's a bit weak, if you make it seem really exciting or engaging or whatever it is, you're going to have more traction. And ultimately, you might get to the same outcome.
Yeah, yeah, it makes perfect. I mean, it does make sense. It's like if we're not going to make things interesting, then we can't expect people to be interested in many
Yeah,
ways. And so it's getting when you've got something I would consider to be very important in what you're doing. It's we've got to get people excited. People should be nowadays, but let's make sure that we
yeah.
use we get people excited to want to make those changes that are going on now.
Exactly. And actually, that's just reminded me of a second one, which I really like. So there was in the last company I worked at, a chap there who he was very senior designer, product designer, worked in a lot of different places. And it was just a brilliant term that he would have as a team if we found ourselves um, like getting really sucked into a debate that almost didn't matter from a delivery perspective. It didn't matter necessarily to the customer. It didn't matter from an ability. And he would just go, look, and so he would just say, this is Muda, right? And I think it's sort of I've since been told by one of my team members here is that actually it's sort of more of a Buddhist term, and it literally means literally nothing. Like it's nothingness. And but the way he would use it is just go like, guys, right? It wouldn't be finger pointing. It wouldn't be say, hey, Aaron, stop talking about this. It doesn't matter. You would just be like, this whole conversation isn't adding value to what we're trying to achieve. Like this is Muda, and you go, yeah, and it just instantly made everyone go, yeah, you're right. Actually, it is.
Brilliant.
And you stopped, and it was brilliant because there was no accusation on anyone in it. It
Yes.
was a comment on the thing,
Yep.
not on the people.
I think that technique of third party, we often call it third party. Talk about
Okay,
in the
right.
third party means that you can talk in the abstract a bit more, and
Yeah.
there's no specific and things like when we obviously occasionally have to look at people's performance, talk about the behaviour rather than the person. It's not
Yeah.
labeling the person as that. It's just that behaviour was that type of behaviour, whether it was inefficient, ineffective, lazy, whatever. The behaviour was not the person, because
Yeah, no, completely.
uh,
And I remember working with, I found it a lot in previous jobs when working with, say, the Dutch or maybe some of the Nordics. It was brilliant because, there's a bit of a learning curve, let's say, as a Brit to go on in terms of things, but they would just be like, you know, this is terrible, right? Say it was a presentation or whatever. I was like, and equally, you could talk to someone about like, guys, we can't send it. This is not decent enough quality, and everyone's fine about it because there's no personal indictment on you as a
yes,
person who's made it. It's not about your quality. Nothing to do about you. It's about this. And often this is a collective thing anyway.
yep,
And I think it's something that really was very helpful for me as going through that phase of learning in my earlier career is that a lot of the time when an output isn't good enough, there's no personal reflection, right? There's many, many different things which impact how something has come to be.
yes.
So to assume it's down to a person is almost silly, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's fascinating. Yeah, yeah, it's so valuable because being able to take emotion out of the situation just moves things forward. There's something that we often talk about. It's called transactional analysis. You might be familiar with it. I'm no
I'm
expert,
not, but yeah, okay,
but
go.
it talks, especially it's quite relevant to being a parent. Is um that the best conversations and outcomes come when we talk as it describes adult to adult. I'm going to say grown up to grown up. Grown up people,
Mhm.
they look at the situation objectively with little emotion and say, this is the situation, whether it's murder or anything else. This is it. The challenge we often have in relationships is one, and there's no order in this, Aaron, but one party will either adopt a parent approach to the relationship, which is either the there are specific terms for this, but basically the critical parent that tells you you're never good enough and you know everything's wrong, or the conforming in effect parent that tells you everything you do is perfect even if it's not. You know, are bless.
Yeah.
Or the and the other party will and it doesn't have to be parent first. It can be, but the other party is childlike, which is either rebellious child, do exactly the opposite. I won't do whatever you say. Or the conforming child that again will do it, but they don't believe in it. They're just doing it because they're being told to do it by the parent. That
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And consequently, those sort of parent, whenever we go to parent child or child parent, those aren't really effective. It's the grown up conversation of this is how it is. This is
Yeah.
whether it's good or bad, and so it's really fascinating because the more we can get to that grown up to grown up, and you know, we've literally talked to a couple of clients yesterday about one happened to be parenting somebody a lot. I let them get away with stuff that they probably shouldn't. And another one admitted to a little bit of childlike behaviour in throwing the toys out the pram, and it's just fascinating that get back to this grown up conversation of logic on
Yeah.
emotional analysis is so valuable.
No, definitely. And it can be a challenge, isn't it? Sometimes to take that step back, try and
Yes,
because it requires a certain self-analysis, right?
yes,
To come back to that logic as well. That require critique of yourself, of the situation, of what the other person's feeling. It requires empathy at the same time, and so yeah, it's something that I suppose probably has to be practiced and probably
I
we
think
all
it does. I mean,
continually practicing, right?
yeah, 100%. I mean, I know in what I've done, you know, it's something I've had to learn over quite a long period of time because it's, you know, we all still will adopt those behaviors and stuff. But I think the biggest challenge we all have as humans is we tend to perceive beliefs as facts in general. So
Yeah.
it's what we believe to be true, we say is true, and that therefore can cause completely different points of view. And that sort of almost like a stalemate of views when two people's views are literally no, it's this, no, it's that, and this is my belief that it could be this, rather than
Yeah,
um,
this is the fact of it. Yeah,
it,
my belief in it. Yeah,
it,
I feel, I believe, etc.
yeah, I believe it allows us to be more flexible in our thinking. That I believe it's true, but I'm open to the idea that it could be different, and let's talk about that. But
Yeah,
no,
no,
it's
it's really interesting.
fascinating stuff. The mind is a fascinating thing, both in a good way and a challenging way, and
Very true.
equal proportions. So, thinking about the mind, and I guess learning. What have you learned about yourself throughout your journey so far, Aaron?
Yeah, like I mean, I think I probably touched on it earlier. It was this whole point, like I've got to be really passionate and interested about what it is I'm doing in order to have that kind of
Yes.
sort of that drive. So that was, I think, one of those big learnings. I think also just sort of you start learning over time what, for me, it's what sort of problems I find interesting, which ones I find, oh God, this has been sort of uninteresting. It's a chore to do. It's sort of a energy drain to do this task rather than an energy gain. And so
Yep.
I think even just actually learning that, that there were certain things that are energy draining tasks and, we can do them for a period of time and then almost we need to find something more interesting and energy gaining again
Yes.
to do. Um, so yeah, I think those are some of the big things, sort of on a personal level, I guess. Trying to think of other things. Yeah, I probably.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And looking at Hydrologiq itself, what does the future look like for you guys, and what challenges do you perceive you might face, if any?
Yeah, I mean, well, there definitely will be challenges, and there definitely are perceived ones. I wish I could say there were none. Actually, no, I don't wish I could say there were none, because that would probably mean either we're doing something far too easy and boring, or
Good point.
or not very valuable. So yeah, I mean, the future for us, like business is growing very quickly, which is great. I think we have the, I suppose, challenge now of keeping up with almost that growing interest, but also driving it forward. Practically, that means this balance of sort of amount of stuff to be done, internal resource, equally, the amount of fundraising that comes in, but
Yeah.
balancing pace of that versus pace of growth of the market and matching all of these
Yes.
things. So um, that's probably no different than any sort of more typical high growth startup kind of VC style business.
Yep.
But what I think is going to be really interesting for us is we founded the company as a remote first business, with really kind of out of choice, actually, in many ways. Some of it was necessity. We founded it like February 2020, right before COVID. So a lot of the growing was happening during COVID, and
Yep.
but also like from this perspective that certainly both Ben and I really believe that actually great talent can be found anywhere.
Yep.
And if you're willing, if you want to find that great talent anywhere, it is easier done through a remote first business. But I think then that in itself will lead to a challenge whereby actually, frankly, you do need people to people conversations. You
Yeah.
do need that time together. Some people thrive better in that environment.
Yep.
Certainly, I enjoy it. I'm more happy working in a remote setting. I'm more okay with that. Co-founder Ben loves being in amongst people and things. And so as we grow as a company, it will be undoubted that we're going to end up having a more of an office where people spend their time in that office.
Yep.
But then how do we manage that kind of culture of what was a remote first business? And if something is fully remote, you can set up a lot of the culture, you can set up the processes to drive that really well, actually. I think it can be done really well. It
Yes.
requires as much thinking about human resource and interaction and process
Yep.
as if you're in an office. It's not like one or the other is easier. They both require time and thinking, but meshing that into a hybrid model whereby there's a significant proportion of the workforce quite remote. Like, so,
Yeah.
for example, even though we're a York-based business, I live just outside Edinburgh,
Well.
and we have almost the East Coast Main Line covered. There's,
Yeah.
Newcastle, York, one person in Croydon, someone in Oxford, so
Brilliant.
I we very much want to keep growing in the north because I think there's one, a lot of our customers are there. Two, not many people say this, it is geographically central to the UK when you start
Yes.
considering the extent of
Yes.
Scotland
Yep.
that happens
Absolutely.
beyond Edinburgh. Um, but there's just so much potential there, and there's a lot of growing that we feel needs to be done there.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant.
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, it's very exciting times. It'd be great to keep maybe revisiting this on a regular basis just to track your growth as you keep going. If that's okay with you, but
Oh, absolutely.
I'll be really keen to. It's fascinating what you're doing. But what I'm also keen to know what you would say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would probably come back from a place of like a third time around saying it makes me really
Yes.
passionate about it. But really believe in it. I think a piece of advice I was given by a sort of mentor friend who'd founded two companies before. He then was a manager of mine at this one of the places we worked, and then he was also a VC. He'd basically said like pick something that's small enough to start but big enough to matter, right? And
Ooh,
it's this sort of thing that, there are loads of really, really important things, but there's like boil the ocean size things like, oh, how do we completely rebuild our UK energy grid, right? You can't start that as a startup business.
yes.
I mean, maybe you can if you're a multi-exited, founder or whatever, you got all
Yeah.
the money, you throw at it, you can immediately go at it hard and really, really big. But like
Yes.
vast majority of people are not in that
Yeah.
bucket.
Yeah.
So start small enough to matter, small enough to start, big enough to matter. And I think, coupling those two things, right? Because then you're saying, well, okay, I've got to find something that will have a big impact on value, right? So
Yeah.
that could be a smaller set of people who it's just going to be genuinely life changing. If it's on the
Yeah.
consumer side, number of businesses where this is radically changing for them. Um, you probably don't want to go for the whirlpool effect where it like literally, whirlpool dishwashers or whatever, right? I remember someone making this analogy once, like it'll affect many, 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 many people. But if
Yeah.
Whirlpool make an incremental change there, it affects many, many, many people, but like it's really kind of inconsequential. But you've hit
Yes.
that same 1% of people. Like you're far better off looking for the 1% of people that really, really, really care and are going to buy, right? So it's this
Yeah.
small enough change, but you still need to be able to grow sideways. So it's like, if
Yes.
Google makes change, everyone cares and it affects everyone. But unfortunately, we're not all Google immediately, right?
Yeah.
So um, I think that, if we were to come back, I'd say think about those two things.
Brilliant. And if you started again, is there anything significant that you might do differently, do you think?
Um, this time around, no. I mean, if there is something significant that I would do differently, I probably haven't learned it yet. I'm sure there
Yeah.
is going to be something, right?
Interesting.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think, there's this, I suppose something I do often think about is this tension between how big and hard do you go early on versus how much are you saying, well, you go too big, too hard, and you can kind of almost outgrow a market from a valuation or what you're trying to do and everything else and run out of steam too early. And that balance. So maybe we'll have found as we get down the line that we got that judgment wrong. Maybe that could be a thing. I certainly, from when we did the dry cleaning business, learned that actually don't be shy to go out and say, yeah, look, what we've built so far is actually proving this market, and can we have some money to grow it? And I think that's what we did wrong the last time round, is we had a business with revenues that was growing and we'd shown traction, all this other stuff. But we were all kind of too young in our careers to go and have the courage, almost to go, and sort of the arrogance to go, yeah, we've built something really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
You give us some funding and we'll grow it bigger, and we're going
Yes.
to give you a great return, right? And
Yes.
so I think, some of that, like, would I do that differently? Certainly that was something I thought from last time into this time, was just have a bit more faith, courage, arrogance almost, that, yeah, I believe my idea is pretty good. Like,
Yes.
if we can't, if as a startup founder, if you can't believe that your idea is really awesome, game changing, and going to make a big difference, how are you going to convince someone else of that?
Yeah.
So
Completely agree. And yeah, and there are risks to investing in potential high growth businesses, but then there's the rewards to go with them. So it's as you rightly say, and I think most people, many people I work with, when I start to work with them, there is this challenge that accepting that growth typically costs cash. It doesn't always. I've worked with one or two businesses that are actually cash generative as they grew, but they're the lucky ones. Most of them, we have to find it. So if we're going to find it internally, then organic growth is going to take a lot longer than investment-based growth. And it's getting over that mindset, I think, because most people I meet, certainly in that sort of SME owner-managed business space, that's the challenge: is that giving up something or feeling that you're giving up something to get something back.
Yeah, definitely. I remember someone once saying, it's way more important to have a small slice of a pie worth something, or a lot of something, rather than having all the pie that's worth nothing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like that's certainly a mentality that Ben and I share, from when bringing on even employees. We're very happy to give them a share of the company because, one, okay, we've got quite a rigorous hiring process, but it means we hire just like exceptional people who are fully aligned, really passionate. But also we want them to stay passionate. So, we want them to be bought into the growth of the company. And I think that whole thing of, give away to get more almost.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's quite a significant mindset change for many people. So but I personally believe the quicker we at least accept that as an option, the quicker we can actually see growth. It doesn't have to happen. I'm working with businesses that are organically growing, but organically growing quickly, or maybe more debt rather than equity-based growth. But
Sure.
at least they're open to this idea. Some people just want to manage it in a way that they've always got that control. I think control is a big part of this.
Yeah, you're probably right there.
And that's okay. There aren't any rights or wrongs in any of this. So every perceivable model has proven to be successful and unsuccessful at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's all good. And finally, I'm keen to know what the best advice you'd give an 18-year-old you, if you could go back in time and do so, Aaron.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting question. I don't know, I'd have much advice for my 18-year-old me. 20-year-old me, probably a bit more advice. I'd probably say work a bit harder in your second year of university. But yeah.
All the same as me.
Yeah. You sort of, the impact of those low grades had a bit more of an impact in fourth year than I'd wanted to admit. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's probably the kind of trite examples of like, actually you might have a lot of things that you're stressed and worried about. Then in the grand picture of scheme of things later on, you'd be like, oh, that wouldn't have been stressful. But frankly, you go back in time, you wouldn't have had all those other experiences anyway. So, stress and worry comes from experience. So you haven't had them yet, so you're probably still worried just the same.
If I can pull back from something you said earlier, because I really get that, because my daughter will be 18 in 13 days. It's mudder, isn't it? So there's so much of the worry and the angst of often having that sort of 14 to 22-year-old, or even perhaps further, and it's just has no value. I work with people. A lot of people I work with, when we start working, they're quite stressed and there's lots of fear and concern about where things are going. And I always say to them, because I've had to learn this myself, is if it doesn't serve me, if that feeling doesn't serve me, thank it, because it's just a little bit of a warning, tap on the shoulder. Something might be a little bit amiss, but we don't need to go to the level of fear and concern that we
Yeah.
often go to is just look, yeah, I get it, but it's not helping me because most people aren't energized by fear. Um,
Yeah, no, that's extremely true. And I suppose, I'm thinking aloud here, reflecting, is that it's probably representative of this shift of how what a career meant, right? And there's still this sort of transition phase
yes.
whereby a career was I've gone and I've either done an apprenticeship or I've done some sort of training or I've been to university to set me up for doing X. And I will do X majoritively for my life.
Yes.
I might
Yeah.
change once. And like to that very extent, and so like there's still, I think, probably a slight bias in maybe the education system, in our society and culture, that this is sort of how it works. Whereas, just take myself, like never in a million years would I have thought I would be doing something with generators in construction, off-grid,
Yeah.
hydrogen. And I probably didn't even know what half that was, right? And so the fact is that, I've done multiple things now and in my short career, and I've seen many people do many, many more things again. And it's sort of like saying, well, you might be stressed about what is your path, but actually it will work itself out. What's going to energize you today? What's going to energize you tomorrow? Because if you do those things, you'll do the things that can energize you. You're going to do it well. And if you do it well, it sets you up with more opportunity. So it's almost like, don't worry about the long running path. Just
Yeah.
worry about the next three steps and what's exciting and what's going to add value to you. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So I was speaking to a lady earlier, and she was talking about the idea of considering life being like a set of lily pads, and just
Right.
enjoy the lily pad you're on,
Yeah.
as long as you want to, and if you then start to not enjoy it, jump to another lily pad. There's no requirement for you to stay there, move. It's all okay, and it was just an interesting sort of visual analogy of. But and she also said, which is interesting, was that no experience is wasted. All
Yeah,
our
that's very true.
experiences add value to who we are and what how we perceive the future to be, and that's true too. So anything we do has value if we choose to
Yeah,
take value from it. So yes,
completely agree.
there's some conversations with my 18-year-old daughter, or soon to be 18-year-old daughter, on that coming soon. Now you've got all that to look forward to. So
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a whole different, probably same repeated set of worries with a slight set of nuanced twist to it all.
it's fascinating. Parenting is such a fascinating thing, right? From it's so different, but it's in different stages. But it's for me, it always got better. Not that it was worse. It was just like, what, this experience was great, then that experience is great, and then that experience is great. But all good. Well, Aaron, it's been really fascinating talking to you, and thank you so much for your time. And I said I'd love to swing by again in another 6-12 months and just see how things are developing on for you. And for anyone that's watching right now that would like to get in touch with you or your business, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose in many ways, one of the easiest ways is, I know it sounds a bit businessy, but find me on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
AranBates. I don't think there's many of me out there. Um, or, through Hydrologiq website, there's an input there, or, my name, Aran.Bates at hydrologiq.com. That's also a way.
wonderful. Well, say thanks again for your time today, and I look forward to catching up
No,
with you soon.
absolutely, Chris. Thank you for yours as well. Been really enjoyable chat.
Thank you.